podcast. It's been a while, but we're back now, and today we are going to talk about our top five favorite villains. So, Darwin, do you want to go from five all the way to one?
Yeah,
All
it'd
right.
be more like a countdown.
Okay. Sounds good. So, do you want to go first with your number five?
Sure. Okay, my number five pick is Jack Nicholson as the Joker. So, I think it's pretty universally accepted that the Joker is one of the greatest villains, not just in like comic books, but also in movies. 'Cause, this past year we had the Joker movie, and every time the Joker has been put on screen, it's usually pretty critically acclaimed, except for what's his name from what's
Um,
what's his name for Suicide Squad?
it's on the tip of my
I can't
tongue.
stand him. Uh,
Jared Leto.
oh yeah, except for him, I think he's the only Joker that's been live action that hasn't been critically acclaimed. I mean, except for like the '60s Batman, but usually people say Heath Ledger is the best one, but honestly, I think Jack Nicholson is the classic, and he was my first Joker that I ever saw on live action, and I don't know, he's always just been my favorite. Like Heath Ledger did a great job, and he was an amazing actor, but I think Jack Nicholson is the Joker that I'd be more scared of going against, because he's more of a planner than Heath Ledger Joker was.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is that all you have to say?
He's also more of like a traditional gangster, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right, so my number five is Hans Landa from Inglorious Bastards.
Hmm.
And he's charming and almost like elegant is, I guess, the word that I would use to describe him. And that's kind of what's so scary about him is just how calm and like relaxed he is. And like you don't really know what's gonna happen when you're around him, because like in that first scene where he's just having a chill conversation with the one dude that's hiding the Jews, and
Hmm.
you you think like they're gonna get away with hiding them, but then the conversation just kind of turns south so quickly. But like still you can't. He's being menacing in a charming way, I guess. But
Well, the thing is that he doesn't have to scream or throw
mhm,
things to be scary. He can just, and he keeps his composure,
mhm,
and he secretly knows everything that's really going on, but he's trying to manipulate people into breaking.
yes,
And I think that's what's so scary about him, because Jack Nicholson as the Joker, he would kind of scream and throw stuff, but I think the thing that's so great about like the Jew Hunter is that he is so calm and composed,
mhm,
and he never loses that composure. And so you always think that you have a chance of getting away because you really think that he doesn't know, but the
but
whole
then
time he
right there,
does know.
boom, yep.
Hmm.
That's why I like him a whole lot. So I think he's my number five spot.
Also, Christoph Waltz is just an amazing actor. Like
Mhm.
every movie I've seen him in, I'm like, yes, like he is Oscar worthy. Like honestly, I think he'd be a really good Magneto, because he has like the German accent, and he could also play like a really charismatic villain, which he has been doing, and I think would work really well. But okay,
Number four.
my number fourth pick, which I just changed before we started, I did have it as Victor Drago, but I don't know. He's not really much of a character in Rocky 4, because he's literally just supposed to be
A brute,
Russia.
yeah.
It's not really, yeah, he's just supposed to be a brute, and he's supposed to like represent science and communism or whatever. He doesn't get good till Creed 2, but anyways, I switched him out for a villain that I like way more, and that's Hades from the Hercules movie. Like,
Hmm.
Hercules is one of my favorite Disney movies, even though it's completely inaccurate to the actual myth. But just Hades in general, I think is the most likable character, and I think he has the best scenes in the movie. Because I mean, Hercules he's fun to watch.
What's that?
He's more of like a Captain America, like Steve Rogers, like Clark Kent Superman character. And it's kind of interesting because the Hades character is just so zippy and zappy with his dialogue, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
And sometimes he just sounds like a used car salesman, but he also runs hell, and I think that's just really interesting and really entertaining to watch.
for sure.
And I think he's a really good foil to Hercules because Hercules is like this soft-spoken, good, righteous character. But then you have Hades, and he's kind of like he has a used car salesman, like scumbag vibe. And I think it's just really interesting to watch. He's so entertaining in that movie, especially when he's like talking to the three fates and everything. I think he's also really funny, which is weird because like this is supposed to be like, oh, the top 5 villains, but then you have this like really comedic, like really funny villain. But I don't know, I really like him. I think he might be the best part of the Hercules movie.
All right. So my number 4 is Colonel Tavington in The Patriot. And right off the bat in this movie, like the first time you see him, you just absolutely hate him. He's played by Jason Isaacs too, and I mean that's one of my favorite actors, at least I think. But Jason Isaacs does such a good job in absolutely making you hate this character so much that you love to hate this character. And I think that's an important thing with villains, is getting the villain to the point where you love to hate them, and that just because of your hate for them, that makes you root for the hero all the more. And I think that's something that's really important. And I mean, he only gets worse and worse, like, in terms of, like, what he does in the movie, to hurt the hero, throughout the movie. It just gets worse and worse, and all that rage just builds up to the very end, and then, when it comes down to the final fight, it's just so worth it. Everything that the story's been through, everything that's happened is just worth the way that it ends with him. And I absolutely love it. So Colonel Tavington is my number 4.
Okay, now we're on to the third pick, and my number 3 pick is the Jew Hunter from Inglourious Bastards. I mean, I know we just got done talking about it, but I mean, he's unsettling, he's charismatic, he's really fun to watch. I think besides Brad Pitt, I think he's my favorite part of Inglourious Bastards. And yeah, he's scary and really unsettling, like you just got called down to the principal's office, except you're about to die, not get in trouble for something small. But yeah, that's my number 3 pick.
All right, my number 3 pick is Thanos. And I mean, I don't feel like there's much explaining that I have to do there. But like there's that whole build up to Thanos within, correct me if I'm wrong, it is like 22 movies, right? 21, 22?
Like 21, 22, I think.
All the build up for those 21, 22 movies. And when we get to Thanos, he's pretty intimidating. I mean, he beats Hulk in a 1v1 fight. So, and that's pretty impressive. But then, he's also got
not only the Hulk, but he also takes over a spaceship full of Asgardians.
Yeah.
Which is also very impressive, and people always forget that about the movie because they're like, oh, well, he beat up the Hulk. But I mean, he also took over a ship full of people that are maybe not as strong, but like the same capability as Thor and Heimdall. I think
for the two strongest Avengers right there, Hulk and Thor. So, I mean, that in and of itself is already reason enough to explain how intimidating he is. But, it's not just his brute strength that makes him intimidating. I mean, he kind of has that same kind of like, well, it's not as chill as Hans Landa, the Jew hunter, but like he can have that kind of intimidating calmness at times too, which and I love that he when he talks, it's almost like poetry as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that might be my favorite thing about him, is that every time he speaks, it sounds like poetry, or he's just like reciting Shakespeare. Oh,
Yeah.
I think that is my favorite thing about him, because not only is he this huge brute strength, like he kills Loki in the first 5 minutes of the movie, and everyone in the
What
Avengers
the
have
heck?
struggled to fight Loki, and he literally just chokes them out within the first 5 minutes. But then he also like you kind of agree with him with like
Mhm.
the whole like overpopulation, like he's the only one that can do it, so you're kind of rooting for him, but then you're like, oh wait, he's gonna kill everyone. I guess I shouldn't be rooting for him. And I think he's so interesting to watch. I mean, at the end, he does complete what he set out to do, and he just goes back to his farm, and he
Mhm.
just becomes like a simple farmer, and I think that's really interesting. 'Cause,
For
I
sure.
mean, if it was like Doctor Doom or Loki or whatever, they would have wanted to rule the earth and make everyone kneel, but no, not Thanos. He just wants to go back to his farm at the end of the day.
Mhm. So yeah, Thanos is my number 3.
Okay, my number two is Darth Vader. I mean, we've talked about Star Wars a lot on the channel, but I know Darth Vader. I remember as a little kid watching A New Hope for the first time. I remember Darth Vader entering the spaceship with his theme blasting, and he actually like scared me as a child,
Mhm.
because like you see this tall, dark figure, and he like his suit like right now, because I've seen it so many times, I've kind of desensitized to it. But I mean, if someone walked into your room dressed as Darth Vader, you'd probably be scared, because not only is it like just a scary suit, but also his breathing, like it's haunting. Like if you heard that in the middle of the night, you would be scared, because it's just this wheezing sound. Like it sounds like he's struggling, but it also just sounds like he's in control of the room.
Right.
And I mean, Anakin Skywalker in the prequels is kind of annoying, but I mean, especially if you watch Clone Wars, you know how great of a character he is, and then to watch his downfall and turn into Darth Vader is like the best part about Revenge of the Sith, and also just the original trilogy in general. I think like he doesn't get Darth Vader doesn't get good until Empire Strikes Back, whenever you actually learn more about him,
Mhm.
and he actually becomes like an intimidating character. Because I mean, in A New Hope, he's kind of just like a henchman, but he is still scary. But yeah, I really enjoy Darth Vader. I think he's a good foil to Luke Skywalker, because like Luke Skywalker is supposed to like represent hope and never giving up, and then you have like Darth Vader, who did give up and did succumb to the dark side, and I think
Right.
that's really interesting, and it makes for a good dynamic.
Yeah, Darth Vader is really cool. I was gonna put him on this list, but then I was like, I don't know. But I definitely can understand why you put Darth Vader on this list. Darth Vader is so
Hmm.
cool. But my number 2 is the Joker, and it's just like the Joker in general. Joaquin Phoenix did a really good job as the Joker. Heath Ledger does a really good job as the Joker, and then there's Mark Hamill, and just all of those people. And I don't, I don't feel like I can really choose between which one, like which version of the Joker I like the best, just because they're
Hmm.
all so good.
I
Um,
mean, they're all so different, and they all kind of represent something different for the Batman that they're going against,
right.
if that makes sense. Because like Jack Nicholson is like a gangster. He like is organized crime, and then you have Heath Ledger, and he's supposed to be chaos, like he literally is the agent of chaos. And then you have Jared Leto, and he's like a Hot Topic commercial. And then you have Joaquin Phoenix, which I haven't seen the movie, but I mean I've heard it's really good. He's supposed to like represent society
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. So I mean the Joker can put on these different faces of what he needs to represent to push the story forward. So I mean he's a very versatile character, and yeah.
Well, the reason that I like the Joker so much is, like, I find him, predictably unpredictable,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that I feel like is a difficult thing to achieve, is making a villain who is just so completely wacky and unpredictable. Like, you never know what he's gonna do, but it's going to end up being bad.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then hold on, let me look at my notes. I love the. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I mean, the if you look at it from a writing standpoint, you can't really just make him do anything. You have to make him do something that makes sense
Mm-hmm.
and is kind of symbolic. Like the thing with like the Dark Knight is that with the whole boat scheme where the citizens determine the fate of the prisoners or whatever, like that works because it kind of shows like the flaws in humanity or
Oh,
whatever.
yeah, yeah.
But I mean, also you can't just have him blowing up random stuff and him being like, "Oh well, I'm just crazy," because then it's just like, okay, well then, why doesn't Batman just put him in Arkham? Or I mean, he does, but I mean, does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
you can't just have him do random stuff. You can't just have him like spray paint a house onto the side of a building and be like, "Oh, I'm just completely crazy and random." It's like you have to make it work, and I think that's something that a lot of times the cartoons, like, I mean, except for the old like 80s 90s cartoon, I mean, I think that's something that they get right, is that they portray the Joker very well, and
Mm-hmm.
they know how to make his schemes make sense and fit his ideology.
And that's the kind
Because I
of
mean,
Joker
not
that I'm
everyone
talking
can.
about, is like the one that's written well. Um, but I also love the whole thing. Like the Joker points out that, like, Batman, he says something around to the point of, like, Batman can't be Batman without the Joker, and Joker isn't the Joker
Mhm.
without Batman. And I just love how he points that out too. So I think that's really cool and an interesting thing, an interesting concept. Um, I really like the Joker. So when he's done well.
Also the thing with like a lot of superhero villains is that like sometimes like Spider-Man has such an extensive rogues gallery
Hmm.
that he can live without the Green Goblin, like,
Right.
or he can live without Venom. But I mean, the thing with the Joker is that the Batman just can't exist without a Joker. Like that's why they keep bringing him back. Is that
Hmm.
without Batman, there is no Joker, and vice versa. If that makes
Oh
sense.
yeah, totally.
I mean, there even within Star Wars, you can have Obi-Wan Kenobi without Darth Maul. Like in the Clone Wars, like if Darth Maul hadn't showed up, then I mean Obi-Wan Kenobi probably would have stayed around the same character. I mean, we wouldn't have such a great story arc with Darth Maul, but I mean, you can have Obi-Wan stories without Darth Maul. I mean,
Hmm.
that's what they did for the longest time. But I mean, you can't have a Batman story without the Joker showing up. Like in every comic book run, every cartoon, every movie series, the Joker has showed up. I mean, there's a reason for that, you know. But
Yeah. So that's my number two. Down to number one.
my number one pick is Doctor Octopus from Spider-Man 2.
Hmm.
The thing, so High Top Films, who is notorious for being like a diehard Sam Raimi Spider-Man fan, which I am too sometimes. But he has this great thing
Sometimes.
where he breaks. What?
Sometimes.
Yeah. And he does this thing where he breaks down like Doctor Octopus on how he's like literally a reflection of Peter. If Peter like would give up being Spider-Man and would marry Mary Jane and would dedicate his life to school and stop being late to class. You know, like he like even the costumes that he wears, like in that first scene with Doctor Octopus, like he wears like blue and red, which it's supposed to be like that, so it makes you subconsciously think of Peter, and like they even kind of look similar. Like Doctor Octopus has like the brown eyes and like the brown hair, just like Peter.
Mm-hmm.
Or I guess Tobey Maguire has blue eyes, but anyways, like they're supposed to be similar. You're supposed to subconsciously think of Peter when you think of Doctor Octopus,
Right.
and I think he's my favorite because he is literally a reflection of Peter Parker. That Peter Parker would give up being Spider-Man, which I mean, in Spider-Man 2 he does, and he realizes that like it's his responsibility to be Spider-Man. And I really just enjoy. I don't know the name of the actor, but I really enjoy his performance in the movie because he's funny and he's charismatic, but he's also like, I mean, Sam Raimi in those movies, there's some cheesy dialogue, but he's honestly kind of scary whenever he's gone full Doctor Octopus. Like this scene where the surgeons are about to work on him and it becomes like a horror movie there for a couple minutes.
Yeah.
And I don't like Doctor Octopus is kind of scary, but I mean, I think that's just one part of it. I mean, I really just like how he is a reflection of Peter Parker, and I think that works really well. And I think Doctor Octopus might be the best part of Spider-Man 2, which like a lot of people like. The thing is that if it was any less great than it is, then I don't think the movie would work as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like it would still be a good movie, but I mean, without such a great villain to drive the story, then I don't really think it would have worked as well.
Yeah.
Especially because Spider-Man 2 is a very Peter Parker oriented story. Like there's like probably less or just right about 20 minutes where Peter Parker is wearing the Spider-Man suit. Like that movie is very strictly more of a drama about Peter Parker. And you can't really do that if you have Venom running around. I think that was the problem with Spider-Man 3, is that Venom they didn't portray Venom to be a very good reflection of Peter. Which I mean, all of Spider-Man's like greatest villains are a reflection of Spider-Man.
Right.
And I think that's just something where they misstepped for Spider-Man 3. But yeah, Doctor Octopus is my favorite villain.
All right. My number one. Actually, what do you think about like the Doctor Octopus in the Spider-Man PS4 game?
I think he's great. I mean, he also does the same. He's also kind of the same
The
way
same,
as
yeah.
Peter, but I really liked him. I mean, there was a part of me that didn't want him to become Doctor Octopus. Like when I
for
first
sure,
started
yeah.
playing, I was like, he was like, oh, he's gonna be the main villain of the story. I was like, okay, that's kind of lame. But then you learn more about him, and then you see the chemistry that him and Peter have. And then at the very end, after the fight, and Peter Parker is like, "You're everything I ever wanted to be, but you threw it all away."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, it's heartbreaking because that's just another role model and like father figure that Peter is losing, you know. And I think, I don't know, I really like Doctor Octopus in the game because he's kind-hearted, he's a genius, and also he's just so kind to Peter. Like, there are so many people in Peter Parker's life that are messing with him and like screwing him over, except for Doctor Octopus in that game. And I really enjoy his Doctor Octopus's struggle with Norman Osborn and just trying to figure out how to get the grant money and just trying to figure out how he's going to make things work. Because I mean, that's a very Peter Parker thing too. I mean, that's why Peter Parker is so relatable, is that he's really just trying to figure it out. Like, how is he going to balance being Spider-Man, and how is he going to balance being Peter Parker? I mean, that's one of the biggest things with Spider-Man 2 as well, is that through the entire movie, he does this balancing act of trying to figure out how he's going to do it. I mean, and eventually he gives up being Spider-Man and he goes full Peter Parker, but then he has to go back to being Spider-Man. Like I said earlier, it's his responsibility. But yeah, I really like PS4 Doctor Octopus. I think if I would have been in charge, I would have waited one more game, then do it, just to flesh out their relationship even more, just so it'd be more heartbreaking.
But it still gets
But
the
I
full
mean,
effect, I feel like.
oh, for sure. But I mean, I really would have. I mean, if I was in charge, I think that's what I would have done. I think I would have pushed someone else, like primarily the Sinister Six, to the forefront. But I mean, I think it works anyways. I mean, Spider-Man PS4 is like, I think, the most perfect Spider-Man story and the most perfect Peter Parker that we have ever gotten. Like, comic books included, cartoons, movies, video games, everything. I mean, I think that Peter Parker is the best Peter Parker we've ever gotten. But
Yeah, okay. So my number one pick is Emperor Palpatine, Sheev, the man himself.
oh,
Uh,
really? After Rise of Skywalker?
Here's the thing. I'm not including the sequel version of Palpatine. I think
Okay.
Palpatine from the prequels and the originals is at least my favorite movie villain, or just villain. And the reason that is because, you know, to be able to be so patient and completely destroy the Jedi Order from the inside, right under their noses, I mean, that's an insanely impressive feat. And you know, he's just so smart and so cunning and scheming. It's all of that just had to be so carefully planned. And Ian McDiarmid does a fantastic job of portraying Palpatine as both, you know, the Chancellor and as the Emperor. He's scary and completely evil, and the way like he's always ready to replace one of his apprentices with somebody new, always ready. Like, I just really like that, and like especially if
Now,
you go into like the Clone Wars and stuff, like it just shows how cool he is, especially when he's fighting Darth Maul and Savage Opress. Oh my gosh, that fight is so cool. What were you gonna say though?
now, how do you feel about him in Rise of Skywalker?
Do we really want to talk about that?
But no, that could be its own episode.
Yeah.
That'd be a very depressing and a very long episode.
I just feel like it was really cheap, and you know, like the whole thing, like, oh, I've created the final order, and this is gonna be the complete and full demise of the Skywalkers and everything like that. It's I don't feel like that was his plan from the get-go. And the whole thing about what makes him so cool, at least in my opinion, is the fact that, you know, everything that we've saw originally was part of his plan. It's this huge master plan. But like Rise of Skywalker, that's like, was that really your original plan, was to build this huge fleet that just burst from the ground randomly, you know, and coincidentally, you know, you have all those Sith troopers. Where did they come from? And you have all these Sith worshippers, these cultists. Where did they come from too? I don't remember seeing them anywhere before. I don't know. It's just weird, and I absolutely hate that movie so much.
That whole movie is weird. But now,
We'll talk about that another time.
Now,
But
did you think Snoke was Emperor Palpatine? Because quite a few people did.
I didn't think he was. To be honest,
Mhm.
I was for the whole idea that Palpatine's dead. Like, he died. Because if Palpatine is alive, then that just completely destroys everything that Darth Vader, that Anakin Skywalker was. Like,
Mhm.
because he was the chosen one and he was supposed to destroy the Sith, but not in the way that everybody thought he would. He had to become a Sith in order to destroy them. And I don't know. It's like if he lives, then Anakin hasn't brought balance to the Force,
Mhm.
and his death was for nothing. It was all in vain. And
Like it kind of takes away from his sacrifice, kind of like in the same way Rogue One kind of takes away from Luke blowing up the Death Star. Because it's like Luke uses the Force and the Force guides him blow up the Death Star. But then you watch Rogue One, it's like, oh, well, there is always a weakness. He just got lucky. And it's like,
yeah,
okay, well, that kind of takes away from it. Like, it's still cool and it's still a cool story, but I mean, it kind of takes away from the original story that we're supposed to be watching.
mhm,
But
um, yeah,
now, do you have any like honorable mentions for villains?
um, Darth Maul,
Yeah.
Darth Maul for sure.
Now, are you talking about from Phantom Menace or Clone Wars, or
Clone
just
Wars,
both?
Clone Wars, Clone Wars and Rebels. Because even in Rebels, he's still pretty cool. Um,
I mean,
Darth
that's
Maul's
where he
one,
really becomes a character. I
right?
mean, in Phantom Menace, he's not really doing a whole lot besides showing up and fighting Qui-Gon Jinn and
And
killing
in the
them.
Clone Wars, he's just all about revenge. But like, you really see how menacing and conniving he is in Rebels. Even though I don't really like that show, but I mean, there's still good parts of it that I enjoy.
Yeah.
Um, who are some of
Um.
your honorable mentions?
Okay, the first one okay, have you seen the movie Knives Out?
No, I haven't. I've been meaning to watch that though. It's on
Oh,
Amazon Prime, I think. So
literally, I think it's one of the best movies. Like I'd say like top 20. It's so weird because Ryan Johnson wrote and directed it. So he's capable of making really good movies.
hmm
And so it makes me think like The Last Jedi was very rushed. I mean it was, and it was only made on a rough draft. So it kind of makes me sad because Knives Out is so well written, and it's the way that it's shot it's like eye candy. It's so appealing to watch. But anyways, the it's kind of a spoiler, but Chris Evans in that movie plays this like jerk, like a trust fund guy, and
hmm
he is just such a jerk to everyone. It's such a flip from watching him as Captain America
Yeah.
to this like trust fund baby frat boy, and it's just so he. I guess he's not really like
So is he like
a
the
he.
the crazy ex-boyfriend from Scott Pilgrim, kinda?
Oh no, but I
No.
mean. No, he doesn't ride skateboards and wear leather jackets. He wears sweaters in this movie.
Ah.
But but like it was so refreshing because in my head he is Captain America, but then to just see him in this role cuz it's kind of weird cuz back in the early 2000s these are the kind of roles that he played all the time, kind of like the Human Torch,
Yeah.
where he was like, "Oh, I'm a cool guy. I wear leather jackets." Like kind of like in Scott Pilgrim where he's this like cocky jerk. 'Cause, I mean, those were the roles that he used to play, but then he became Captain America, right? I
hmm
don't know. Chris Evans in the movie has these moments where he's very soft spoken and he's very like calm, and he's like, and you think, oh hey, that's Captain America, but then in the next scene he's just a jerk to everyone. And you're like, oh my gosh, like this guy sucks. Like he's just he's like charismatic, but in a bad way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But
Another one, Armstrong commented, he said, Zemo and Killmonger is greater than Thanos and Loki. And I think he's got a point there too.
I
Z-
don't think so. The
well,
thing
I don't know. Like
with
Zemo,
Civil War,
Zemo's really smart though because he uses the Avengers against each other, and I was really like that about him is that like he knew that he doesn't have the strength himself to stand up against them, and he even says it too, but he says now turn them against each other, then that's something that's an Avengers level threat right there.
hmm
um, and then Killmonger too was a really good villain that you could uh, kind of relate to almost, and I think that's also something that can make a good villain is having them be relatable to a certain point.
but my thing with Zemo is that he doesn't really need to be there. If that makes like the movie would work if he wasn't there. If the
Yeah,
government
that's
was
true.
really like, hey, you guys, like Scarlet Witch blowing up the building would have been enough to spark the conflict of the government being like, oh, you guys are out of control.
Hmm.
That literally would have been enough. Like Baron Zemo doesn't need to be there. I think that's my biggest thing is that he may have been like, ah, yes, I will turn them against each other, but like really, he doesn't need to turn them against each other. Like the government is already doing that. Like he doesn't really need to be there. If you cut him out of the movie,
Hmm.
then really he's not making it's not like he's leaving that big of a hole. The movie could still work. You would have to rewrite some of the scenes, of course, but I mean the movie would still work without Zemo.
Yeah,
I
that's true.
mean, I that's the thing. Even with the Civil War comic story, like really, the only villain is is portrayed as Tony Stark.
Hmm.
But I mean, the thing that makes Captain America: Civil War is so great, even the comic books, is that they're both right. They're not like you may agree with one more, but I mean, it's also one of those things of like, oh, picking the lesser evil. And so you're gonna go with the guy that you agree with more rather than your favorite character, if that makes sense.
Right.
But the thing with Killmonger, I think Killmonger is great, but I think it would have been better if we had known from the beginning that the little kid outside of the apartment was Killmonger. I think that would have worked better just structurally like as a story as telling the story is that if we knew that Killmonger was that little kid.
Right.
But I mean, I think Michael B. Jordan is one of the best young actors in Hollywood, and I feel like people don't really know that.
Yeah.
Like he's amazing as Killmonger, and he's amazing as Creed.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
I honestly think I might like Creed more than I like Rocky as a character. I feel bad for saying that because I really love Rocky, but honestly, I think Creed is the more relatable character for me personally, and also I think Michael B. Jordan has better acting chops than Sylvester Stallone did in the
Hmm.
first Rocky. But that's my scandalous opinion.
Any other villains that we could mention?
Um, I have Ian McKellen and Michael Fassbender as Magneto.
Yeah.
I think the movies that they're in aren't always great, but they're always my favorite parts of the movie.
For sure.
And also just Michael Fassbender being able to portray a younger Magneto and absolutely killing it. I don't think a lot of actors can do that. Like if you watch Shazam, I feel like I'm the only one who like noticed it, but Zachary Levi is acting like a very different character than actual Billy Batson, and it really bothers me because like Billy Batson's like, oh, I'm an edgy teenager. He's like, I'm gonna
Yeah.
beat up this kid. But then you have Zachary Levi, and he's like, oh my gosh, I have superpowers, and everything's so great. But then, and it doesn't work for me. I've watched a ton of reviews, and nobody has said anything about that. So I don't know if it's just me, but like it's something that really jarred me during my viewing experience of Shazam.
Hmm.
But I mean, there's never a moment when I did not absolutely buy in that Michael Fassbender was a younger version of Ian McKellen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like he embodies the character perfectly, and he plays a young Magneto. I mean, there's no lapses where you don't think he's not playing a young Ian McKellen as Magneto, and I think it works super well.
Let's see. I can't think of any others at the moment.
What about television? More of like a TV villain.
Hmm.
Because you know who's better than Thanos, Killmonger, Loki, and all of them? Kingpin from the Daredevil TV show.
Yeah,
I
I really like
honestly,
Kingpin.
I think he's the best live-action Marvel villain, besides like Doctor Octopus from Spider-Man 2. But I don't know. He Vincent D'Onofrio also pulls off the same thing as Christoph Waltz, where he doesn't have to be throwing stuff to be intimidating.
Right.
You know, and whenever he does, it's scary. But I mean,
I remember
he's
there's like that one scene with like the car door. Do you remember? It's in season 1, but that was intense.
that scared the crap out of
Oh
me. But
yeah,
I
for
mean,
sure.
even whenever he's not really being a villain, but whenever he's just around Vanessa, and he's just
Mm-hmm.
a total gentleman. Like he is the most suave gentleman ever. And him and Vanessa have such a great back and forth and have such great chemistry. And every scene that Vincent D'Onofrio is in, he absolutely steals from everyone else. I mean, even Charlie Cox, who I think is absolutely perfect as Daredevil. I think Charlie Cox. I'm honestly so mad that they canceled Daredevil, just because Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio did so well as their characters.
Yeah.
Even though season 3 isn't super great, like there's a lot of times where it's like, oh, this isn't great, but it's all right. But I mean, they are always the best parts of the show. Especially, I think Vincent D'Onofrio is just so great, so talented, and he has this charisma, but you also know that he could slam your head into a car door. Like he kind of feels like Marlon Brando as the Godfather, you know? I don't know. He's just so entertaining to watch all of the time, and he also has that. He also is kind of like Thanos, where a lot of times everything he says sounds like poetry or
Yeah.
Shakespeare. And he does that so perfectly. And honestly, I think he's the best villain in like the Marvel movies and TV shows. I think he's just so perfect as Kingpin, because I mean, I never really took Kingpin seriously, especially in like the comic books or the cartoons, like because like Spider-Man makes fat jokes, so then it's like, oh well, I don't need to take him seriously. Like
Right.
Spider-Man keeps making these like weird fat guy jokes. It's like, okay, whatever. But I mean, Vincent D'Onofrio like makes him this force to be reckoned with. Like he is a hurricane, if that makes sense. Like he just takes over the show every time he's on screen, and I don't know. And people have been like saying that they want him to meet up with Peter Parker Spider-Man, but honestly, Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin could kick the crap out of Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Like there's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah.
Like I honestly think like Peter Parker would have the crap beaten out of him by Vincent D'Onofrio. Because he's just so intimidating, he's so big, and he's so great. Okay.
Well, then there's
Okay.
also like uh the Kingpin in the Spider-Verse.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about him? I don't think he was as intimidating as Daredevil, but
I think if I hadn't seen Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin, I think I would have liked him better. But just because like I'm so attached to Vincent D'Onofrio as the Kingpin, he was just okay. Like he was just there. Like he could have been replaced with any other evil genius, you know. And the Kingpin has never struck me as someone who would do a big science project like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I really think they could have just he could have been interchangeable with any other evil genius in Spider-Man's rogue gallery. But I don't know. I think Kingpin actually first appeared in Spider-Man comic books, but really I think he works so much better as a Daredevil villain because he is a crime boss in Hell's Kitchen, and that's Daredevil's domain, and I think that just works better.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, really, Spider-Man is like one of he's not the strongest, but he can go toe to toe with other superheroes and high-level supervillains. I mean, if he really wanted to, he could just web up Kingpin or whatever. But I mean, I think Kingpin is such a better foil to Daredevil, you know.
Yeah.
But yep, that's all. I'm done ranting about Kingpin.
While you were ranting, I was still trying to think of villains. Like that's one of the things. Like as I was coming up with this list, like I had to watch different things in order to see which I liked the best, and I like started looking up stuff too. So it's kind of difficult to think of things just off the top of your head.
I've got a question. Who's your favorite Disney villain? Because Disney has a whole lot of great villains. I mean, their best movies have really good villains. I mean, their just okay movies don't really have a very good villain.
That's a good question. I don't. I'm not sure about that either.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so many options. They're all kind of similar
Mm-hmm.
as well. Like I don't know. I did think of one villain though. Negan in The Walking Dead.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely love Negan. He's so funny, and he's pretty scary too. Like when you're introduced to him, and I don't want to spoil it for you, but what he does is quite terrifying and just completely rocks the whole world for the group that we've come to know and love in the show. But he's intimidating. He knows what he's doing, and he's just funny. He's so funny. So, what
Okay,
else is
another
there?
one I have is Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not talking about Angelina Jolie. I'm talking about like
Right.
the original cartoon. 'Cause I mean, she is like, because I mean, Sleeping Beauty was one of my favorite movies as a little kid, and then she was like this very scary enchantress who just because she wasn't invited to like the baby shower, she just shows up and curses the baby.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's kind of funny, but
Um.
how do you feel about Scar? Lion King is like your favorite Disney movie. How do you feel about Scar?
Oh, Scar's. He's pretty cool. Um. I don't like him for killing Mufasa, but yeah, Scar's a good villain. I really enjoy watching Scar, and like just his voice is, I feel like, is iconic, and when he sings "Be Prepared," ooh, that gives me chills. Not in the live action though. The live action one was just like a little poem like thing that he did. It was dumb. I didn't like it.
I haven't seen the live action
You
Lion
don't need
King.
to. It's not that
I've
good.
been trying. I haven't really been trying, but I've been avoiding watching the live action versions of the Disney movies because some of them are, I don't know, some of them are like, why do you need to redo it?
Mm-hmm.
Like Lion King, like, okay, that is renowned as one of the best animated movies, let alone just a normal movie. Like, it is known as one of the best movies of all time. Why do you need to redo it?
Yeah.
You know?
There was one thing that I did like more in the live action version, and that was
Mm-hmm.
like I think they added a hyena, or maybe changed one of the hyenas, but like the one that they added was like a leader of the hyenas and was really intimidating and scary. I don't remember what her name was, but like at the end of she didn't really do much, which I really hated because um later on during like the final battle in the movie, that hyena goes like toe to toe with Nala, and
Mm-hmm.
they play it off like there's this piece of dialogue where it sounds like there's some kind of like rivalry with those two, and I was like, I want to know more about what happened between these two, and I want to see more of this hyena, but that was like the only interesting thing that they did with her. I wish there was more of that. There was stuff like, I don't know. It's one of those things where like this could have been cool if you put more in the movie focusing on this. But then again, you can see how it's like, but it's not her story or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. When she was on screen, she was intimidating. So, and it was always
Yeah.
interesting. Um, but yeah, I much more prefer the cartoon version over the live action. I love the
Mm-hmm.
cartoon version. Um, and then like the Lion King 2, also one of my favorites. And the villain in that one, uh, shoot, what's her name? It's mm, what is it? I feel like it starts with the Z. Lion King 2. Nope. Um, Zira. That's right, Zira.
Mm-hmm.
But she's really scary too. Um, let's see. Is there any others that you can think of? Any other kind of
Um,
questions?
I mean, the one that I was like really considering putting on my list was Apollo Creed, but I mean, he turns into more of a protagonist
Mm-hmm.
uh,
That's
after the second movie. So I
yeah.
mean, he's more of a protagonist than really an antagonist.
Um, I think Drago in Creed 2 is pretty cool too.
Hmm.
Um,
I mean,
but
my only
I
problem with that is that I really wish they get would have given him more scenes to be in,
mm-hmm.
because I mean, he has a couple scenes and he doesn't really have a whole lot of dialogue. I mean, there's a scene with where they're at like the dinner and his mom shows up who left him and Victor as like when Victor not Victor when Ivan was a child. And so then he has like this bit where he's like, she left us, all those people are fake or whatever. I mean, and that's pretty much it. He doesn't really
Mm-hmm.
say
the
any
I'd say
anything else.
the only thing that would keep me from like putting him as a villain really is the fact that they humanize him so much in Creed 2. Like
Hmm.
you're kind of on his side. You're not only on like, Creed's side because he is the protagonist, but like you can definitely feel for Drago and his son, and you're like, these guys aren't really that bad. They're they're actually just human. There's like they had everything taken away. They've had it so hard ever since then.
Hmm.
I don't
Especially that scene where
at the
Victor and
yeah.
Rocky are in the restaurant and Sylvester, and I keep wanting to say Sylvester, but Rocky's like, oh well, that was a long time ago, and
Mhm.
then Victor's like, no, not for me, not for me, it was yesterday or something
Mhm.
like that, and it was like, man, he's not letting this go. Like this literally ruined his life. Losing this fight literally ruined him. You
Yeah.
know, and like not only did his like country abandon him, but like also his wife abandoned him,
His
his family
family,
abandoned him.
everybody did.
So I mean, there's like a little part of you that like wants him to win just so he can get all of that back and actually redeem himself. But then you're like, but then I always like towards like once it switches back to Creed, I'm like, yeah, I want him to win. I want him to have like that revenge of of Victor killing his dad and him never being able to have that relationship until he met Rocky.
I love how like at the end he throws in the towel.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just it works on so many levels. It's so symbolic and poetic of the entire thing. Um, Creed 2 is so good. I like it better than the first Creed, I think.
Mm-hmm. I think Creed 2, I think is the best out of all of the Rocky movies, but you can't have Creed 2 without the first Rocky and without Rocky 4. Like you can't
Mhm.
have it without all of them. So I kind of feel weird saying like I think it's the best because you can't it doesn't stand alone by itself.
Right.
You have to have that foundation built by the first Rocky and Rocky 4 for it to work. But I think just personally, I think it's the most inspiring. Like I cry every time I watch it, and it's not even like even when Creed wins at the end, I cry. But just like the scene after he fights Drago for the first time, and he's in the hospital, and Rocky shows up, and he's crying. He's like, "Well, you left me. Like, where were you, old man?" Like that part just like kills me on the inside.
Mhm. It's such a good movie.
Hmm.
But that was a tangent for sure. We should just have an episode where we talk about the Rocky series. I feel like, because we could
It would
definitely
just be
do that.
it would just be an episode of where we of like the moments in the movies where we cried the most.
We should definitely do that. I think that would be fun. But I think that's gonna do it for this episode of Pass the Gravy podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed, and definitely give us suggestions on what kind of stuff you guys want to hear us talk about and all that kind of stuff. So, is there anything else you want to say, Darwin?
Uh, nope. I
All
don't
right.
have anything.
Well, until next time.